Is anyone on the Zoom?
Oh, it's always.
Is there anyone on the Zoom call?
Yes,
Yeah, Bart, it's John and
Okay.
Karen. We're here.
there's a lot.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to mute, and we're going to begin shortly. What does this say?
Yeah, it's saying recording.
No, this.
Oh, yeah, it's showing.
Oh, I'll let Bart do this.
I'll rip it. You rip it.
Okay.
Rabbi will explain that to you.
Yes, let's lower it first, please.
We'll get you one. We'll get you one.
Can I get a map?
Brian?
You just answered to my sister.
Does anyone want a copy of the copy?
Do you know how to put that on?
Those have a good one. They can really nice here, so you don't fall.
No, no.
Surely Denise and Dan, the ribbons that you're wearing, your lives. Please wear them during your period of mourning to symbolize your grief, your love for your husband and family, your faith in God, your comforts and others. The liberty that please praise are you, Lord our God. Praise are you, Lord our God, sovereign of the universe, sovereign of the universe, righteous judge. Thanks for the ribbons, turn them up, surely how beautiful light. Just take them out. Friends, we gather together this afternoon to celebrate the life and to honor the memory of Jim Chessin. On behalf of the family, we really appreciate your presence here with us, both in person and on Zoom. The presence of each other to one another during a difficult period in our lives is a great comfort and a great support. Thank you for being here. Adonai ma'adam v'teda ehu ben enosh v'chashvehu. O Lord, what are we that you have regard for us? What are we that you are mindful of us? We are like a breath. Our days are like a passing shadow. We come and we go like grass, which in the morning shoots up renewed. In the evening it fades and it withers. You cause us to turn to dust, saying, return, you mortal creatures. Would that we were wise, that we understood whither we are going. For when we die, we carry nothing away. Our glory does not accompany us. Mark the wholehearted and behold the upright. They shall have peace. The author of the first of the Bible's 150 Psalms describes for us in language that is both poignant and succinct the nature of the good life and the fruits of that. Happy are those who have not followed the counsel of the wicked, nor taken the path of sinners, nor joined the company of the insolent. Rather, the teaching of God is their delight, and they study that teaching day and night. They are like a tree planted beside streams of water that yields its fruit in its season, whose foliage never fades, and whose fruit always flourishes. Let us join together and take comfort together in the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Kohelet, the author of the biblical book of Ecclesiastes, reminds us that for everything there is a season, a time for every experience under the heavens, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to discard, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak. I now want to call on Rabbi Enid later to pass on some reflections about Jim Chessin.
Thank you, Rabbi Klein. Jim Chessin was a good and generous man. As I spoke with Shirley and Dan and Debbie and Jordan and Brian and Carly, that sentiment echoed through every comment and every story. Jim was born on March 11, 1931, probably at Mount Sinai Hospital, to Dan and Sylvia Chessin. He was the youngest of three sons: Howard, known as Buddy, Richard, known as Dickie, and James, Jimmy. His family lived in the Heights. They then moved to downtown after his father, a pharmacist, suffered a stroke. They were closer to family who could help with his care and with the care of the three boys. His mother worked at her in-laws' Chessin's beauty salon on East 105th Street, and then crossed the street to work at Chessin's barbershop, which Shirley and Dan described as the Kibitzers Club. What's a barbershop for? Jim's Uncle Al helped to raise him and his brothers. Uncle Al was beloved by them and was like a father to them. Jim attended Miles Standish Elementary School in Cleveland, and then his mother and brothers moved back to Cleveland Heights, and he attended Roosevelt Junior High and graduated from Heights High School. Jim did not go on to college. He thought college was for professionals, and that was not his path. But truly, Jim was a born salesman. A story. Bill stopped in at A.B.'s little general store looking for a bottle of mustard. The shelves were loaded with salt, bags and bags of salt. A.B. said he had some mustard, but that he would have to go down to the cellar to find it. Bill went down with him, and there, to his surprise, were still more bags of salt. Everywhere he looked, he could see salt. "Say," said Bill, "you must sell a lot of salt in this store." "Nah," A.B. said sourly, "I can't sell no salt. But that feller who sells me salt, boy, can he sell salt." Friends, Jim could sell salt, and he was a self-made man. Shirley shared that he would work 7 days a week after they were first married, and then some. They met on a blind date when Shirley was 15 years old and Jim was 20. They dated for over 3 years, and when Shirley turned 19, they were married by Rabbi Abba Hillel Silver in 1955. Soon Denise was born, and then Dan. Jim worked hard and worked with Jim Horvitz to grow said products. Jim Horvitz was the chemist and produced the products, and Jim Chessin took care of sales and administration. The men were opposites, but great colleagues. Horvitz's desk looked like a tornado had struck, yet he knew where everything was. And Jim Chessin's desk, well, let's say everything was always in its place, and there was a place for everything. Jim and Shirley loved to travel and enjoyed taking family trips. Jim traveled for work, but always tried to be home in time for his children's games or special events. And he was great at bringing home gifts. Once, even a crystal Madonna for Shirley from his trip to Canada. "Jim," said Shirley, "a Madonna?" "But it's so beautiful," he replied. It was beautiful, but it did find its way to a new home as time went on. In the 1960s, Jim had a very early version of a portable phone that he kept in his car. Dan shared that he and Denise would go out to the car and get the phone to call the house. But at $3 a call, it did not go over very well with their parents. And Jim would take Dan and his friends to the sand pits that were part of the business. White young boys wouldn't want to run around and play in the sand. Jim knew how much they enjoyed it. Jim loved sports and had season tickets for the Browns games. As Shirley said, when the Browns really played. During one game in the old stadium, it was very, very cold, like 10 degrees. Jim and Shirley left early. They found their way to their car and saw that the antenna was frozen. The ever-dutiful wife, on their way home, each time they stopped at a light, Shirley got out of the car and pulled on the antenna so that the radio could pick up the game and Jim could keep track of the score. True testaments to a person are the statements that his grandchildren make about him. Jordan spoke about his grandfather's work ethic. He did whatever it took to get the job done, and he had high expectations and did what he could to help you achieve them. Brian was awestruck by his grandfather's ability to listen and to mentor. He loved seeing other people succeed. He was thorough, empathetic, consoling, offering advice and feedback in such a loving and heartfelt way. He was a strong communicator, but he never gave his opinions unless asked for it. Carly fondly shared that her grandfather did whatever he could to make us happy, even to making sure Carly had pink golf balls for a round of mini golf. "Carly, I think your grandfather would have gone to the moon and back for his grandchildren and children and great-grandchild." Debbie shared that her father-in-law was a man of conviction, generous in giving his time and knowledge. He was kind to his family and friends and the world around him, and he always had a smile. He never complained. Jim's kindness extended to all. The staff at Wiggins Place was so supportive of Jim and Shirley and had so many called to share their condolences. Jim's was a life well lived. He loved his family and was hugely close to his brothers and their families. There were many good times and lots of laughs, wonderful family, neighbors, and friends. As family friend Ellen Heyman put it, he was such an amazing man, handling whatever comes along with grace and dignity, never complaining, always so interesting, and most of all, always so interested in others. Indeed, Jim Chessin was a good and generous man. Zichrono livracha, may his memory be for a blessing. Rabbi.
Thank you very much, Rabbi. Beautiful words. When I met with all of you 2 days ago on Zoom, one of my first questions was about Jim's character, his virtues, and the attributes that made him the distinctive person that he was. And here is the first thing you told me, that Jim, as Rabbi later has already said, was a self-made man. Starting with nothing, he worked hard, with focus and with purpose. And in the process, he created a satisfying life for himself and a fine life for his family. Now, Jim was a master salesman who could close a deal with a customer who up to that moment didn't really know that Jim had wanted anything. And I sensed that part of what made him so good at his job was his positive and his joyous approach to life and his natural affability. In addition, Jim was a strong-willed person who had his opinions, to be sure, but never, I was told, imposed them on his children. And he never gave his opinion unless his children or his grandchildren asked for them. Jim was indeed a good person, a great friend, who had a good word to say to and about everyone. And in turn, he was admired and loved by all who knew him. Now, Jim and his partner, Jim Horvitz, created Set Products and made a great success of the business. So much so that Jim was able to retire at the age of 50. But retirement didn't suit him. So after 2 years, he was asked to work for Mamiko by Jeff Korak and by Tom and Frank Sullivan. And Jim worked there for another 20 years. And when Mamiko merged with Tremco, Jim continued for another 5 years, finally fully retiring at the age of 75. But though Jim was a hardworking executive and salesman, he found time to devote himself to the well-being of his community. Indeed, the list of his efforts and his involvements is quite formidable. For Jim helped to found the Gathering Place and to get it off the ground. He was a lifetime trustee of Montefiore, a board member at Belfair, a member of the board of the Cleveland Jewish Federation, and chairman of the Federation's building division. As a tribute to Jim and to his contributions, the leadership of Montefiore sent out the following message upon Jim's passing, and I quote, "Jim was always there for us from well before the building of the home in Beechwood in 1991 through all of the last generation of activities and programs. He always had a ready and generous response to the needs, but he was also here for the whole community, playing active leadership roles at Federation and beyond. The community will miss him," end quote. And while Jim was deeply involved in community affairs, he was both eager to volunteer and reluctant to receive any recognition for his efforts and his involvements. And in his spare time, if we can imagine that he had any, Jim was an active reader, completing 3 or 4 books a week. Moreover, as Rabbi later said, he had a long love affair with sports, and for 60 years he attended with his friends and with his family just about every Cleveland Browns home game and many Cleveland Indians games. In addition, he played tennis actively and golf reluctantly. Though he regularly accompanied you, Shirley, you who loved golf far more than he did, he accompanied you nevertheless on the golf course. Family was certainly a central part of Jim's life. His beloved wife and partner of 65 years, Shirley, his children, Denise and Dan, his son-in-law, Art, and his daughter-in-law, Debbie, his wonderful grandchildren, Michael and Dana, Emily and Mark, Brian, Jordan, and Carly, and his 2 adorable great-grandchildren, Jack and Timothy. Jim is survived as well by his sister-in-law, Carol, many loving nephews, nieces, and cousins, and many dear friends, both in Cleveland and in Florida. He was predeceased by his parents, Dan and Sylvia, by his brothers Buddy and Dickie, his sister-in-law and brother-in-law, Lita and Ruby, and his sister-in-law, Jane. Jim Chessin lived richly, and he lived well. He was a master salesman and executive. He had a wonderful marriage for 2/3 of a century. He raised 2 fine children and lived to see the flourishing of his grandchildren and the promise of his great-grandchildren. He was, in a word, a mensch. Those who loved and admired him will never forget him. Zichrono livracha, the memory of Jim Chessin, will always be our blessing. Amen. Now I want to call on Jim's son, Dan, who will reflect on the life, the qualities, the accomplishments of his father.
Thank you, rabbis. Thank you for everyone being here. On occasion, not often, I would be at a funeral with my father and we would hear a family member speak. And he would always look at me and say, wow, that is so nice. I hope one day you'll say nice things about me at my funeral. So let's give it a shot. So he lived with an easy grace, dignity, and he never, ever complained. He lived with an easy grace, dignity, and he never complained. What a good way to be. He was born in 1931. He was fiercely private about not talking about or lamenting about his health issues. A great life, really up till the last 3 months. So difficult for my mother and our families to see. Hard on him too, but he never, ever complained. Often when I was growing up in college, his brothers would call me at college and they would ask me, how is he doing? I'd say he's fine. They'd say, well, that's what he told us too. He just never wanted his health to be a topic with anyone. And Art, my dear brother-in-law, once said, we'll never know how he feels or if he has any pain because he never will say so and he never will complain. He was always positive and basically very happy to be alive. He had a great attitude. Foremost and first of importance to his way of life was making my mother, Shirley, happy, and Denise's mother too. 65 years of marriage. My mother had just turned 19 by a month when they got married. That was his queen. And my mother happened to be the football queen of Glenville for 3 years in a row. Her happiness, health, safety, and enjoyment of life were really paramount to his way of life. And what a life they really were able to share. 2 healthy kids, grandkids, 5, 2 great-grandkids. Lots of nephews and nieces that were hugely close to him and great loyal friends throughout his life, many of which grew up with him through his life. He was very close. I've never really seen any brothers closer than his brother Buddy and my Uncle Dickie and Aunt Jane, partly because their father had taken ill so young and for so long. And they took very good care of their mother, our grandmother. My mother's sister, Lita, and Uncle Ruby and Albert Reisenfeld, and each of their great families. And our Chessin and Don cousins, and many cousins on the Klein and Rosner and Bruder side. He loved to share books with family members. He loved to talk sports of any kind at any time, particularly Cleveland sports, with anyone. He would talk about the business world endlessly with my son Jordan and anyone else who was interested in business, Brian also. They traveled throughout the world, particularly after I had graduated from college. I can't think of too many places they haven't been. He loved tennis. He played tennis 4 or 5 days a week until his back would no longer allow him to do that. He also loved to shop, but he loved to shop for others. There was never a time that he would not get great joy, particularly with my mother and sister, and they would go out and they would shop, and he got no greater enjoyment out of that. They also really liked to entertain, and they had beautiful houses both here in Walden and in Florida, and both my parents were the perfect hosts, but my father liked being a host. He was a good host and just enjoyed being with people. Certainly he was the best and greatest father to Denise and me. He always supported our efforts in our lives, never with opinion, rarely with any questions or doubt. Usually he just listened and said, "Great, how can I help you?" Great in-law. Great to all of our family members and our extended family members, generous to a fault. Both my parents keep their opinions to themselves unless asked, and that's nice. It's a nice way to be. The grandkids, that's Michael and Dana, Emily and Mark, Brian, Jordan, and Carly, and Jack and Timmy, these 2 little dapper guys that are here today. They were the life. They were always shown a good life. Family trips, family cruises, Disney trips, trips to their beautiful house in Florida, riding their golf carts, letting the kids in Cleveland keep his car in the wintertime to drive to school. So they were the only kids at Solon High School who drove a brand new Mercedes. Wasn't so bad. He would take them to baseball games, would go to Cleveland Brown games. He had tickets, we think, for about 60 years to the Browns, and some of those years he enjoyed. Very, very loyal to friends, many who were lifelong friends. Very interesting to see how many of their friends have been friendly with them for so long. And this was, living in Cleveland half a year and in Florida half a year for close to 30 years. They had great years, great times on Bellingham, in Beechwood, where Denise and I grew up, and in Walden, where they, I think, spent the most amount of time, about 30 years, various couples clubs with lots of dear, dear friends, and the 30 years in Florida. So we think he was kind of the best family man, the best loyal friend, the best husband, the best father. He was also a real good listener. He would always listen, and then he would, if you asked, give your opinion, his opinion. Work for Jim Chessin was not work at all. He loved what he did, and he found success beyond his wildest of dreams. He always felt it was enjoying what you do, working very hard, being lucky, and at the right place at the right time. He worked hard, he played hard. He had fabulous role models while he was growing up, guiding him throughout his entire business career. He learned, he listened, and he acted upon the advice from our dear, dear Uncle Al Berman, who helped raise my father and his brothers after my grandfather, his father took sick and was bedridden with around-clock nursing for over 10 years. He listened, he learned from our Uncle Dave Light, from his stepfather, Harry Blonder, from Ernie Siegler, from Uncle Henry Bruder, his brothers, Buddy and Dickie, and his partner and dear, dear, dear friend, Jim Horvitz, and his wife, Bobby Horvitz. He started out as a public accountant. He was very good with numbers, but his true avocation was sales and administration. And he had a very fortunate and great partnership with Jim Horvitz at Set Products for about 20 years until they ultimately sold the business to Martin Marietta. Retirement in the 40s sure sounds good to me, but it didn't to him. And he tried it for a year or two. He had an office that he went to every day in Beechwood, and he read a book. And it just was not his cup of tea. After a couple of years, he found a second career that was very gratifying with much enjoyment and success at Mamico International, ultimately Tremco, which was supposed to be a one-year stint to help his good friend Jeff Korak. But he enjoyed working. He enjoyed working with Jeff Korak, and he enjoyed the Sullivan family and the Carmen families at RPM. And that turned into a hugely successful 20-year career. And he was so proud, ultimately, to turn over the reins to a very capable Randy Korak. He had such a knack for making you feel as though you were the most important thing to him. And he always explained things in a way that anyone could understand. And this was always interesting to me. I don't know if Denise has heard this before. As a very dear family friend said over and over, Jim Chessin would never use a dollar word if a nickel word would work. He was very active in the community, as Rabbi Klein said, and with philanthropy, and he always was generously assisting others, including some of his friends. But he didn't want, nor did he need, recognition for it in any fashion. His happiness was truly seeing the cause succeeding, particularly the gathering place. Both my parents are that way. It's a nice way to be. Great career, good to the community. Best boss, I can tell you from working for him. He always said in these later years that the golden years are not always so golden. Unfortunate. And that growing old, he and Jim Horvitz would always say, is not for sissies. But he enjoyed growing older with my mother and seeing her content and happy. Denise and I and my mother would like to give a special thanks to Tammy Battle and her great crew of 24/7 nurse aides who really assisted and comforted both my parents these last months. They were with my father until the extreme last minute at his home, which was his wish. He wanted to be home with my mother. Listen, I don't want to single anyone out, but we must give a special shout out to Bob McConnell for everything he has done for our family and was such a devoted friend to my father for 20 years. Jim Chessin was a good person. He was a good son to his parents. He was a good son to a good nephew to his aunts, to my mother, who he adored, to me, to Denise. He was always very proud of Denise, and to our kids, each of our kids, to each of his grandkids, to lots of very loyal nephews and nieces, cousins, and to his coworkers, the community, and their many loyal and lifelong friends. He'll certainly be sorely missed by us, but never forgotten. We will toast him tonight with his favorite shot of Absolute. And I thank you. I would like very briefly just a couple sentences, if I can. I'm not making a phone call, guys. I would like to find on my phone some comments that Brian, my son, had said, and these kind of represent the grandchildren's views on their grandfathers, and particularly Brian's. Brian said, "Rest in peace, Poppy." That's what they all called him. "Yesterday, our family lost a loving husband of 65 years, father, grandfather, great-grandfather, and a best friend to all. He was and still is a role model that each of us sets out to live our lives like, even if it's only at a fraction of the generosity, empathy, and love that he had showed to each and every one of us each and every single day. I miss you already, but I know that you will be right alongside me as I continue to try and live up to your image as best that I am able to. Can't wait to watch the Browns win that Super Bowl title. Might not be for a few decades." Thank you, everyone, for being here.
Thank you, Dan. A memorial prayer. You can shed a tear that they are gone, or you can smile because they have lived. You can close your eyes and pray that they'll come back, or you can open your eyes and see all that they left. Your heart may be empty because you can't see them, or you can be full of the love you shared. You can turn your back on tomorrow and live yesterday, or you can be happy for tomorrow because of yesterday. You can remember them and only that they're gone, or you can cherish their memory and let them live on. You can cry and close your mind. You can be empty and turn your back, or you can do what they would want you to do. Smile, open your eyes, love, and go on. As you can, I invite you to rise for the El Mali Rachamim. El Mali Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Amatzeh Menucha Lechona, Tachat Kanfei HaShechina, Im Kadoshim Tohorim, Kazohar Harakiyam Azhirim, Et Nishmat Ari Ben Daniel, Shahalach Leolamo, Ba'al Harachamim, Yastirehu Beseta Kenafav Leolamim, V'yitzror B'yitzror HaChayim, Et Nishmato, Adonai Hunachalato, Vayanoach Bashalom, Al Mishkamo, V'Amar, Amen. Compassionate God, eternal spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to James Chessin, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in your eternal presence, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting love. God, you are his inheritance. May he rest in peace. And let us say,
Amen.
Amen. We continue now with the mourner's Kaddish. Yit Gadal, V'yit Kadash, Shemei Rabbah, V'yalma Divarach Imutei, V'yamlich Malchutei, V'chayechon, V'yomechon, V'chayei Dechol Beit Yisrael, Ba'agala, V'yizman Kariv, V'yimaru, Amen. Yehei Shemei Rabbah Mevorach, Leolam Ulamei Olmaya, Yitbarach, V'yishtabach, V'yitpa'ar, V'yitromam, V'yitnaseh, V'yithadar, V'yitaleh, V'yitalal, Shemei T'Kudusha, B'richu, La'ela min kol berchata v'shirata, tush bechata v'nechamata, da'amiran v'alama v'baru, Amen. Yehei shalama rabba min shamaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'baru, Amen. Osei shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'baru, Amen. By Marge Piercy. Look around us, search above us, below, behind. We stand in a great web of being joined together. Let us praise, let us love the life we are lent, passing through us and the body of Israel and our own bodies, and let us say, Amen.
Amen.
Time flows through us like water. The past and the dead speak through us. We breathe our children's children blessing. Blessed is the earth from which we grow. Blessed the life we are lent. Blessed the ones who teach us. Blessed the ones we teach. Blessed is the word that cannot say the glory that shines through us and remains to shine, flowing past distant suns on the way to forever. And let us say, Amen.
Amen.
Blessed is the light, blessed is the darkness, but blessed above all else is peace, which bears the fruits of knowledge on strong branches. And let us say, Amen.
Amen.
Peace that bears joy to the world, peace that enables love, peace over Israel everywhere. Blessed and holy is peace. And let us say, Amen.
Amen.
May the Holy One of blessing, from whom all things come and to whom all things return, give us light and peace on this day of grief and mourning, And may our service for the memory of our dear James, our dear Jimmy, bring comfort and strength. And let us say, Amen. There was,
Right there.
yes. The last mitzvah that we can do, act of loving kindness, is to provide a assistance in burying our dead. And as a symbol of that, we invite you, if you would choose to take a handful of sand.
Those who wish, we can place this right here. You can return to your cards. Invite those who wish to return to their cards to do so. Thank you for being here.
This concludes our Zoom service. Thank you for participating.